What is the most profound video game ever made? Personally, I think it's Never Seven, but that's just me. I think that game is just very fascinating. So fascinating that I'm still currently working on a video for it. But I understand why someone would say Nier Automata is the most profound video game ever made. Just while I have everyone's attention. Do I have to do it on this monitor? I don't know. I don't know how any of this works. I'll save it for the second half of this. I'll save it for the back half of this because what I'm trying to show off isn't really as relevant. um I have I have a new desktop background. I'll show it off later. uh I didn't mean to do that. Get out of here. Get out of here. Anyways, we're gonna watch Max Starrett video. I had a couple things to link though. So the VTuber model I'm using, I'm gonna link it to all the chats. So, there we go. YouTube knows where to get this model. Um, there we go. Yeah, there we go. I really like this model, and I would love for anyone interested to go support the person that made it. They have a username that's all numbers and things. Let me see if I can pull up. Let me see if I can pull up. Um, that's just telling me something. That's just telling me one thing. I shouldn't be streaming like this. I should follow my own advice and never do display capture unless that is the only way I can. Anyways, they have right here they do have their name written out. Open with Brave. Hexos. That's what their name is. So the username they have on Booth is 0x4682B4. So they're the person that made this model. I've linked their Booth page. Go check them out. They've got some cool stuff there. They've even got a thing I'm interested in where they have a bunch of they have like a chibi model customizer so you can make a bunch of chibi models. And because of the kind of thing I want to do, I think that will be really good because part of what I want to do is I want to be a shape shifting VTuber. I think that would be funny. Um, so I'd be a shape shifting VTuber And as a shape-shifting VTuber, I would have I would have all these models that I use. Mm. Oh, it's doing the thing where it lost tracking for a second. That's perfect anyways. So let's just take a sip. I'll need to lengthen that out. But before we get started with this video, I want to make sure that everyone gets a link to the video so they can watch it later without my dumb voice and pausing and everything else. There we go. That's the link to the video. And uh-oh. All right, we're good to go. So, what does Max Starrett have to say about Nier Automata being the best, most profound video game ever? I don't think he means best. I think he just means most profound.
In case you're new to this channel, you're gonna need some context. Back in February of 2019, I put out a video titled The Most Profound Moment in Gaming History. The moment in question was a scene at the end of Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. Naturally, with a declarative title like that, I was going to invite people who disagreed with my choice and wanted to propose either an alternative moment or game that they felt was more profound. In the interest of being intellectually honest, I wanted to play as many of the games that people suggested and contrast them with Metal Gear Solid 2, to see if there was a game or a moment that might transcend it. I have spent the past 5 years doing that on this channel, and
Okay. There's a lot of good contenders on this list. Outer Wilds, I haven't finished Outer Wilds yet. I really need to play the second Persona games. So the Persona 2 games are on my list for sure of long RPGs that I want to play through in the future. And and just looking through all these other ones, Disco Elysium I'm still playing through. I've been really bad about that one. I keep starting up a stream. If you look at my YouTube channel, because Twitch probably deleted the VOD by now. If you look at my YouTube channel, I have a video called "It's Been 999 Days" because it had been 999 days since I'd last streamed Disco Elysium, because I have a life outside of doing YouTube stuff, outside of doing streams. I'm a very lazy YouTuber. That's why I have less than 50 followers on YouTube and Twitch. It's because I'm a lazy bum when it comes to the YouTube Twitch thing. But I'm trying to be more active. Unfortunately, I go through spouts of being more active and less active. But Disco Elysium, all of the stuff I've seen from it so far, there's a lot. There's a lot that's it's very thought provoking, because I forgot his name. Chat. I forgot his name. But he's this heckin' chonker of a man, and he sits there as president of the union, and he knows your name is Harry, but he doesn't know your full name. That guy, he gives me the heebie-jeebies. He scares me. It scares me to death, honestly. That guy alone. And then you have his enemy down by the pier. I like it so much because there's so many things going on all at once. I believe yeah, I don't know. I don't know. There's just too many things going on all at once in that game. I don't know how I have it set up either. I know that Disco Elysium has caused copyright issues for some people, and I think most of my Disco Elysium playthroughs have been um claimed, but I think what I'm gonna do is I am for sure, just because I don't care anymore, kind of, is I am going to um just mm, I might turn off the streamer music mode, and then if I have an issue later on, I can just clip that out and mute it. Um my only thing would be if I wanted to make a long play video that's like a full narrative thing. I'd have to think on it, because a lot of the things I want to do now, excuse me, a lot of the things that I want to do now is I'd be really interested in doing like full streams of games and then cutting them down to their essentials. With visual novels like Never Seven, I don't think I could do that, because Never Seven, Never Seven, you have so much to go through, and I feel like the review style where you go in and you're like, and this happened and this happened and this happened, that's probably better for discussing those older Uchikoshi games. Um, so I mean Katara Uchikoshi, and for those games, I think the kind of reviewing that I want to do would work way better. But yeah, I think I really just need to. I really just need to play through all the games. I think what I might do is I might start with 999, because that game, that series has a lot of stuff that I think Max Starrett would like. Just so many funny things. I can't spoil it because the whole point of 999, one, you can't even play it anymore unless you have a DS. So the only way you can play 999 is on a DS. You can't play it on the computer, even though it's available on the computer. You have to play it on a DS. You can use guides, you can do whatever, but you have to play it on a DS, and you have to solve that last puzzle on your own. And if you don't play it on a DS, you didn't really play it. I'm gonna be elitist with that game, because it was my first Uchikoshi game. I don't know what got me turned on to it. I just found out about it, and that's the one game I will be elitist about, because you have to play it on a DS. I don't care if you emulate it. I don't care how you do it. You have to play 999 on a DS. But I have a whole list of profound games rattling through my head right now. Let's jump off of those and let's go to this list. So, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. I think I played that game for a bit. I think that was one of the first games I streamed on Twitch. Elden Ring has a lot. And we talked about Disco Elysium a little bit. New Vegas. New Vegas has Caesar's Legion, and it has some other ideas thrown in there for good measure. That one's a lot. That one's a little bit heavy. BioShock. I love BioShock. If you get into that philosophical end of it, just the idea, just the absolute critique of Randian philosophy that game is, that's so much fun. And I'm so glad that it came out when it did, because I think even by 2013, when BioShock Infinite came out, I think that unfortunately It just, the way things are, the games just were not going to be as good going forward. 2013 was the last really big year for amazing games. I'm not saying that nothing that's come out since 2013 is bad. I'm not saying that everything is bad since 2013 or anything like that. I'm just saying the last like amazing 10 out of 10 thought-provoking game I can think of, other than Nier, that's come out since 2013 is The Last of Us. I think Nier was like a big shakeup because of how cool it was. So I don't know. But as far as like American games, I think the last really, really great thought-provoking American game was The Last of Us, because after that, like, what did we get? We got God of War, we got a bunch of really cinematic stuff, a bunch of interesting, okay stuff, but nothing that really combined gameplay and narrative in a thought-provoking way. And nothing that really ever had too much of a thought-provoking narrative. Because The Last of Us at least makes you think at the end. And I know I streamed it recently. I need to finish those streams too. I have a long list of things to finish. And I think I get on these creative treadmills where for a little bit I'll focus on one thing, for a little bit I'll focus on another thing, and then I burn myself out on one thing, then another thing, then excuse me. I think really what I need to do is I need to just sit down and force myself to pick one thing and focus on that one thing. So I'm gonna keep that in mind. But all of these KOTOR, you have Kreia in the second KOTOR game, and I really like her positions on things. I like the way things work out in that. I didn't realize The Last of Us was there. Journey is another one that's really fascinating because it's like a little indie game, and yeah, it, it it's multiplayer, but it doesn't tell you that it's multiplayer. And then Pathologic. I think Pathologic's a little too pretentious for profundity. And it's intentionally pretentious. So it's not like they don't know what they're doing. It's just I don't think you can have a game like Pathologic be the most profound game, but it's definitely a contender for the most experimental. I would consider Pathologic and Pathologic 2 the most experimental games because of the way they handle walking speed, the way they handle combat, the way they handle the story. The whole thing is just absolutely profound in its experimentation, not as much in its narrative. I think that's a tricky one. But of all of these, I do not see my pick, which would be probably not Never Seven, but Zero Escape. Zero Escape to me would be like the most thought-provoking game series of all time, especially the first game. Just the way that all ends, the fact that the plot twist is just so good. And like I said, 999 is the only game, 9 persons, 9 hours, 9 doors is the only game I will be elitist about, because I think you really do owe it to yourself to somehow play it as it was originally intended. So basically on a DS, whether that's a physical DS or emulated, because I mean, that if you can't get one, I still want you to play the game. And I think that's really the hard part. Like, if you want to absolve yourself of morality issues, you can buy it on Steam, and then you can emulate it. That's what I'd recommend. You know, that's just my thinking on it. Let's see. I wouldn't put Omori in this list. Persona, I don't know. I would put Shin Megami Tensei in before I put Persona in. I don't know anything about Planescape. Shadow of the Colossus, definitely a contender. Red Dead Redemption, I wouldn't put it on this list. Majora's Mask, definitely. Man, of this list, I think if I had to pick 5, BioShock, Disco Elysium, Deus Ex, Nier Automata, and The Last of Us. And I think maybe I'd get rid of BioShock because I'd replace it with Majora's Mask. So The Last of Us, Majora's Mask, Nier Automata, Disco Elysium, and Deus Ex. Those would be my 5. Because Majora's Mask, you have a lot of profound thought put into such a simple form factor. That's an element of it too, is like the elements that you're dealing with. Like, maybe I'd consider the Outer Wilds if I finished it. But I haven't finished the Outer Wilds, and maybe that would change if I go through and I finish the Outer Wilds. So, but The Last of Us would probably be The Last of Us would probably be my number 1 pick. Just because I haven't really played enough of Deus Ex to know. I haven't played enough of Disco Elysium to know. I've finished Nier Automata. I've finished Majora's Mask. But The Last of Us is my number 1, I think. Just the way that it ends. And I think even now, it would be my pick for, like, the one you could have the most discussions about. Because with The Last of Us, you have a big discussion. It's why I'm streaming The Last of Us. Gonna try and finish streaming The Last of Us soon. You have this whole idea that you can look at where Neil Druckmann, he has taken over the writing seat. He's head producer of the thing, and he comes out with The Last of Us 2. The Last of Us 2 is kind of a very sad product. It's just a very sad game. And not in a good way. Not in a thought-provoking way, not in a way that makes you think. Just in a oh shoot. I didn't mean to do that.
I have spent the past 5 years doing that on this channel.
Anyways, The Last of Us 2 is just not good. And the problem with that is it has this whole focus on the theme of revenge and how revenge is bad and it never ends well for anyone that partakes. But it doesn't go anywhere with that idea. It really doesn't. And I think that a big part of what's lacking in The Last of Us 2 is just there wasn't a willingness to explore the theme. Really quickly, let me move the model so you can see the rest of the list. But the theme that was presented in The Last of Us 2 is just, oh, revenge is bad, creates cycles of violence. And I don't know, very dull theme for a game that big. A sequel to a game as thought provoking as The Last of Us, because The Last of Us, it deals with a lot. It's, you know, how far are you willing to go to save the world? What is your line? And the very end makes you question, is this right or is this wrong? And it also makes you question, like, can you trust these people to do the right thing? Can you guarantee that what happens next is a good thing? I don't think you can. That's really where I land on this. Nier Automata would be my second of this list for sure, and I feel like it'll be for the same reasons that he goes into in this video. I have not watched this video, by the way, but I am a big fan of Max's channel. I've been watching for a very long time. I've been watching since that video he mentioned that was like the most profound moment in video game history. When I was originally subscribed to him, that came in as a new video. So I know I've been watching at least that long. I don't know how old that video is now. What's the other thing I remember? Oh, I remember he had a cover of one of the Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness tracks. That was really good. I remember that. But most of his videos are great. His whole Silent Hill playlist, all of it. Most recently, I think I watched his video on Network. And so I was just like, maybe I need to come back and watch more.
And during that period, I have not encountered a single moment that I believe is more profound. But I have encountered two games that I feel were more profound on the whole. One was the original Deus Ex, which I believe is the most important game ever made, for both its prescient story and the way its game design influenced so many games that came after. However, if I'm speaking just about profundity, I do place one game above Deus Ex, that of course being Nier Automata.
You know, thinking about it too. Deus Ex, really, we need more immersive sims. We need more immersive sims because Deus Ex, we have immersive sims, but none of them are to the level that original Deus Ex was. And the problem with trying to play Deus Ex now is like a lot of it is just it doesn't run well. I know that I've struggled with trying to get it to work properly. The lighting doesn't work. All these different things don't work with it. And I can't tell if that's like intentional. I can't tell if that's my computer. I can't tell if that's my monitor. So I would really like I'd really like to see a team. There are several games where I'd like to see a team try and tackle something like Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 and Deus Ex. Tackle games like those in a way where they're in a more modern engine that runs smoother with like some quality of life improvements that we have now. And then I don't know, just try and keep all those mechanics in where things interact with each other the same way they still do, because I really like Disco Elysium as a like a modern computer RPG. It's done really well, so I want someone to take what's good about Disco Elysium now and try and implement Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 into that. And then maybe with Deus Ex, maybe someone can try to you know, oops, I didn't mean to do that. But maybe someone can try and um you know, put it in the more modern engine. I think that would be pretty cool. I've got to step away for just a second. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Um anyways, like I was saying, I really feel like we need more remakes. Doesn't Max have a video about that? We're going to watch that video next maybe. I'll check and see if he has a video like that. I swear while I was scrolling through the videos, I saw something like, we need more remakes. Let's see if that exists.
However, if I'm speaking just about profundity, I do place one game above Deus Ex, that of course being Nier Automata. While I have publicly expressed this belief once or twice over the past 5 years, I've not qualified that belief as comprehensively as I would like, and now I think it's time to make my case. First, I think it's worthwhile establishing a commutual definition of profound, because that word can mean a lot of different things to different.
That is true, because maybe the list changes if I use his definition specifically. And when I'm thinking of like profound, to me, I'm thinking of what games have made me think the most, which is why Zero Escape, Infinity, The Last of Us, and Disco Elysium would be on that list for me, because as little as I've progressed in Disco Elysium, it has stayed on my mind quite a bit. And as short as The Last of Us is, I feel like it has left me a lot of debate in my mind. I debate that game significantly. Um and I'm going to spoil it, okay? So at the end of The Last of Us, if you haven't played it, here's what I'll do. I'll put up I'll put up a glass of tea or something. I'll put an ice cream cone in my hand. And I'll just constantly eat it, you know. But when that changes to a juice box or a tea or something else, then you'll know that I'm done talking about the spoilers. At the end of The Last of Us, you have gone through this entire journey with Ellie as Joel, and you've even played as Ellie for a small portion. And throughout the whole thing, you have experienced a lot of significant events in these people's lives. So with Joel, the beginning of the game is he loses his daughter. And going through all of this with Ellie, it's like finding a second daughter. It is like not the same as having Sarah there, but it gives him the ability to be a dad to someone else. And that's really the bond that forms between Joel and Ellie, is one of a father and a daughter. It's a very strong bond. You have all these things going on where you've killed people, you've fought with people, you've watched people just kill themselves because of how traumatic the world has become just to the everyday person. And by the end of it, you're on this journey to get Ellie to the Fireflies so they can make a vaccine for this virus. If you play Left Behind, you've seen that Ellie watched one of her best friends turn into a zombie, an infected. She watched this happen, and she knew that she was going to turn next, but it never happened. And so now she's here at this point, unconscious, has not given a say as to whether or not she would be willing to give her life for this. And the Fireflies, almost killed her through their negligence and incompetence, because when the Fireflies come in at the very end and they grab Joel off of Ellie, he's trying to save her life. She is just drowned. She needs CPR. She needs to get to breathing again. She needs medical aid. And they stop one of the most important first aid functions, which is you provide CPR to someone who has fallen unconscious and isn't breathing and their heart isn't beating. You just constantly provide that, because if you stop, that's their heart stopping. A thing that's really scary when you look at CPR done by a machine is the machines that they have that will do CPR for them. Those machines press in deep, and that looks horrifying to people that don't know. This is really how hard it has to be so that your heart beats from an external source, and you're trying to get that blood pumping through every vein, every artery. You're trying to keep the organ, the muscle moving and keep it going. So they stop that. Her heart stops for a while. She is unconscious. She's not awake. And they're just going to go straight into cutting the fungus out of her brain so it can be made into a vaccine that may or may not work. And throughout the entire game, you have come across all of the Firefly stashes. You've come across all of these things that they have left behind. You've done everything that they've asked you to do, and they are in shambles. They are nowhere to be found. They are never around to help you. All you have are just bits and pieces. You only make your way to where their medical staff is in the nick of time because they were about to leave anyways. You barely get there before they leave, and they're just a mess of an organization. They are more of a mess than me trying to string together a coherent sentence. And it's just a mess. It is a disaster. All the way through. And now they are telling you, the player, who has likely formed some connection with Ellie. You know, they're telling you, oh, she's gonna die. She's gonna die to save the world. We're gonna make a vaccine. And you have two options there. You either say, oh, that's fine, or you say, no, that's not fine. Either way, Joel says it's not fine, so you go save her. And it just leaves this very heavy question in the air, because the place where they're performing this operation, it's dingy, it's filthy, it's unsanitary. And you combine that with how there's all these things where the vaccine may not work. It's not a cure, so you can't actually save the people that have already been infected. That it's not like a rabies vaccine as far as I'm aware. It's just to inoculate people from potentially getting the virus, from potentially getting infected. And so you're dealing with all of these things simultaneously converging. And it's a big moment where Joel decides, I'm going to save Ellie. We're going to get out of here. We're going to be fine together. And that is, to me, very profound, because it leaves a lot of room for discussion, for debate on its own. Then you have part 2, which is just a dumpster fire of a game with its ideas and its themes and how it handles everything. And that game brings in its own set of questions that might not be as easy to answer. And I understand that. But then you have the remake of The Last of Us 1. You have The Last of Us 1 Part 1. And that game changes a lot of things for the ending. The hospital is no longer an unsanitary dungeon. The doctor is now Abby's father from The Last of Us Part 2, because this was not planned for. They actually changed the model of the doctor from the first game to the remake so that it fits in line with the second game. And the second game tries to heavily imply that Ellie would have consented, but we didn't know that in the first game. And there's so many other things where it's just... It's a whole can of worms for discussion, I think. And that's what to me makes that story really profound, is just how much you could go into it and think about, you know, changing history in that way. That to me, it just, I really liked the way the first game ended. I really liked how that worked out. I really thought that it could be a contender for this list, like number one, honestly, in my opinion. Just the first game in the original remaster. Um, just because it leaves that much room for discussion. It opens doorways for, like, okay, well, how story intensive can games get while still having a very engaging gameplay loop? Just these combination of factors. And that's what makes me think about The Last of Us a lot. The Last of Us Part 2 adds to this because, it retcons so many things. And then The Last of Us Part 1, which is a remaster of the originals that changes everything to match up with the sequel game, oh man, now you have history being rewritten because the developer really wants to alter how the how the game is viewed. There's a lot going on there. So to me, it just leaves a lot of questions in the air. Um it's the same thing with the Uchikoshi games I was mentioning before. Um I don't know. I haven't done enough of a deep dive on AI the Somnium Files. I've beaten the games, but all of Uchikoshi's games, you know, they mess with perceptions of reality in some way. So, Infinity, you have this whole idea that, everyone can get stuck in an infinite loop. You have these ideas where people get caught up in things beyond them, that they are interacting with entities beyond their control, all these little things that combine together, and it's just a lot of fun. um I think that one of the things with Never 7, the reason I really want to get that video out on it, you have to go through the entire story, 7 times at least. I don't remember how many, but you have to get all of the perspectives on it. And each perspective expands upon a previous perspective. So you start with the default perspective of, oh, there's this artifact that is causing us to loop through time, and some way, somehow, it is tied to our fate. And the only way we can escape fate is by destroying it. Then you expand on that into, oh, by the way, there's more moving parts to this than you realized. Um, there are clones. This thing has happened before. Um, there's a mystery going on. This person has strong feeling, like, it just goes and snowballs. And then finally, at the very end, it's like, we were actually researching this concept that no one's ever really thought of. It's just a hypothetical, and it seems that maybe it's real, and we didn't know. The next Uchikoshi series was Zero Escape. Zero Escape is, oh, your subconscious, every time you have like a premonition of something bad happening, your subconscious just trades places with another version of yourself that didn't go through the bad event, so you live. and that means in Zero Time Dilemma, there's an ending that's really funny, where a character named Carlos comes in. It's the third time the Nonary games have come about, and Carlos is this absolute himbo that just comes in and he's like, okay, well, I may not be smart, but I'm gonna put an end to this. So what he does he's like, oh, I know what I'll do. He becomes a firefighter. He's already a firefighter, but he goes back in time and he reveals to the firefighters, hey, there's something bad going on here. We need to fix it. And so after all of the horror that everyone has gone through, and after all of the trauma that they've been put through, there's only 2 people left out of the group of 9, you know? And Carlos saves them. And they're mad because it's like, if you went back that far, you could have prevented the whole thing. Why did you do this? It's so great. Then AI, the Somnium Files. I don't even know how to touch that one. Nirvana Initiative. I have a stream of the very end of that game. I did some streams on Twitch with that game. But then I stopped streaming it. I accidentally stopped streaming like the major points of it. But I streamed the end of it on YouTube. And Nirvana Initiative has this whole idea of like, you can escape the bounds of reality itself to create the perfect ending. So, at the very end of Nirvana Initiative, you get codes and learn information that are very important, and you go to a very specific scene that's very weird, and it leads you to a divergence where nothing bad ever happened to anyone and everything is perfectly fine. It's really, really interesting. I need to do a deeper dive on AI, I think. But all of Uchikoshi's games make you think about just a lot of the stuff Max talks about, like the Jungian stuff, the archetypes, the idea of the self, the ego, the superego. In Remember 11, one of the questions that's constantly asked is, who is self? And that's just very funny. I wonder how Max would react to the Infinity series as a whole, because I don't know if it's just me thinking about it as someone that's played through all of them. I think Ever 17 might be rough going to now, but that might just be because I've played it through once before. And then Never 7 is still my favorite, but Remember 11, it's definitely number 2. And Remember 11 is insanity. It's amazing, all the stuff that goes on in that game. And it's not even finished. They couldn't finish it before the company went bankrupt. But all of Uchikoshi's games are really good. Really cozy Wikipedia article summaries. As some might say. We should get back to watching this video.
People. In my case, I draw upon the Merriam-Webster definition of profound, meaning to have intellectual depth and insight, although I personally add the adjective emotional to that definition. So when I define a game as profound, I do not refer to its overall quality. I strictly refer to its insight into emotional, philosophical, and other intellectual matters. Now, I do not believe that Nier Automata is the greatest in any single one of these categories. I do not believe its content is more philosophical than games like Disco Elysium or Planescape Torment. I do not believe it is more intellectual than the aforementioned Deus Ex or something like Xenogears. I do not believe it has the same emotional highs as games like Shadow of the Colossus or The Last of Us. But that said, I do believe Nier Automata is the greatest accumulation and balance of all those and other categories. In short, Nier Automata takes the entire corpus of existential philosophy and distills it into parabolic form, making the core ideas of that philosophical tradition accessible to every type of person. Granted, this distillation forces Nier Automata's examination of these ideas to not be as expansive or as complex as they are in games like, say, Pathologic 2 or the Talos Principle. Nonetheless, the core meanings of these ideas, along with their often emotionally gut-wrenching content, are preserved, despite their simplification. The reason why Nier Automata invokes so much existentialist philosophy is because, at root, the game is trying to answer the most important philosophical question of the past millennium. And it makes this attempt by throwing every existential idea at it like the pods shoot energy balls. It is a spiritual question that we continue to struggle with in the present due to its intellectual and emotional difficulty. And it's one we must come to a consensus on soon, for if we don't, our reality could see its reflection in this game. I will lay out that philosophical question and the various genius ways in which Nier Automata attempts to address it. But before I do, a quick word on spoilers. The first half of this video will be spoiler-free, save for a synopsis of the game's story and setting. I will give ample warning before I go into the second half, where I detail specific characters and storylines. If you have to dip out, make sure to bookmark this video and come back to it when you're done. In order to outline the depth and scope of Nier Automata's core philosophical question, we first need to go back roughly 400 years. There was a time in the Western world when publicly questioning or criticizing religion was a crime punishable by death, but the sole reason was not due to a baseline fealty to God. One of the biggest reasons was a belief that doing so was deleterious to the fabric of society. I believe that the English Lord Chief Justice of 1676, Sir Matthew Hale, summarized this argument best when sentencing a blasphemer to death. To criticize religion was to undermine the laws of society. What he meant by this is that Western civilization's social cohesion rested on a belief in two core things. One is that humans were flawed and broken, but the second is that by trying to emulate God, specifically the ideal set by Jesus Christ, one might redeem their flawed nature. This was the meaning of life for centuries in the West, the meaning that enabled people to contend with life's immeasurable suffering. But in the next few centuries, seeds would be sown that would inevitably uproot this philosophy. The Reformation was arguably the first of these seeds. In case you don't know, the Reformation was an intensely conservative religious reaction by a segment of Christians against the Catholic Church. Though it was a movement motivated by many factors, particularly what was perceived as corruption within the church, I will focus in on the one reason most relevant to Nier Automata. The segment of Christianity that would go on to define themselves as Protestants retaliated against the influence that the famous Italian priest, Thomas Aquinas, had on their theology, specifically his attempt to marry Christianity with the Aristotelian spirit of reason. The Protestants, led by Martin Luther, believed that God had absolute sovereignty over our existence, and any attempt to introduce reason into that would undermine God's plan. This, alongside many other reasons, led to a theological split between the Catholics who embraced reason and the Protestants who did not. For the next century and a half, the Enlightenment philosophers who embraced reason warred over whether or not it should be married with faith in a higher power, or if reason negated the existence of God entirely. Philosophers like Spinoza and Diderot believed that a radical embrace of reason alongside a negation of God would be the foundation of the West's new social order. Philosophers like Immanuel Kant and John Locke, though believers in reason, were skeptical about the human capacity to operate purely on reason without God, given our inherently flawed nature. This ideological divide would become exacerbated by the political revolutions that characterized the era, like the French Revolution and the European revolutions of 1848. Radical rationalists saw these revolutions as a concrete expression of social progress, while more conservative thinkers saw the bloodshed of these wars as proof of the insufficiency of reason.
Yep, and this is going to go on for a bit, so if I don't comment on anything, it's mostly because he's going into this mostly as a historical thinking, just to be clear. And I don't know what his total qualifications are, but he has very deeply studied philosophy and psychology. So that's why I'm just letting him talk and give the historical context that he needs for whatever it is he's going to say about Nier.
As the philosopher Edmund Burke argued, humans have neither leisure nor knowledge sufficient to reason right. Will not honest instinct, prompt, and wholesome prejudices guide them much better than half reasoning? Then came the coroner of this ideological war, the one whose philosophy sits at the foundation of Nier Automata, Friedrich Nietzsche. He, a famous atheist, determined that the fruits of the Enlightenment and the advent of science had killed any credibility that religion once had, particularly of Christianity. Thus, he made the famous proclamation that God was dead and we have killed him. Though some who adopt the Spinozian spirit saw this as a positive, triumphant declaration, Nietzsche was far more pessimistic, even displaying sympathy for the likes of John Locke's perspective in this regard. Though he felt that humans would have to create their own values in a world that was devoid of God or meaning, he didn't think that we would be able to do it due to our inherent imperfection. Thus, he predicted in his book, The Will to Power, that attempts to craft our own values would result in bloody conflict, a prediction that came to frightening fruition in the 20th century. This is an incredibly basic overview of an enormous philosophical problem with no universal answer, and yet, Nier Automata boldly decided to build its world and story around it.
And here's what's fascinating about all this. You have all of this philosophy that you can look back on and take pieces of. And you find a lot of the time there are people that, even without doing it consciously, they've somehow stumbled into similar philosophical thinking to different people throughout time. And it's very fascinating how patterns repeat, I would say. Just the philosophical end of it. Over and over again. Also, speaking of Nietzsche, I believe the Xenosaga series, all three of the games are named after like Nietzsche's works. I don't know if there was a reason for that, but I want to say the first game is The Will to Power. The second game is Beyond Good and Evil, and the third game is Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And that is what I know about his influence on those games. I don't know if they go into like his philosophy. I don't know if it's a BioShock situation in those games where like they're either approving of or dismantling his philosophy. What I do know is that there's like some thematic elements that got neutered when those games came to the West, because censorship is a big thing, uh, especially in older games. You know, in older games, the censorship was actually like, oh, there's this whole scene where someone gets decapitated in the video game, and they cut it out of the video game because it was too much for us American gamers, too graphic. Now it's like they added see-through mesh. They added see-through mesh on a character model. Just 5 inches of see-through mesh. How dare they? Censorship gone wild, everyone. Censorship gone wild. Gamers rise. Gamers rise up. Oh, that whole drama was something else, man.
Everything that lives is designed to end. We are perpetually trapped in a never-ending spiral of life and death. Is this a curse? Or some kind of punishment? I often think about the god who blessed us with this cryptid puzzle, and wonder if we'll ever have the chance to kill him.
These opening lines are a perfect summation of this ideological conundrum. It encapsulates the resentment that arises from this need for God to give meaning to life's suffering, despite the fact that this God, if he exists, remains invisible and silent. In his absence, one has 4 choices. One can continue to seek God, one can seek symbolic revenge against God by destroying his creation, one can die, or one can attempt to create their own meaning. Nier Automata uses its story to explore these 4 options, showcasing their merits and deficits. Not only are these arguments easily digestible in their parabolic structure, the game's story writer, Yoko Taro, introduces an element that provides innovative insight to this philosophical problem. Instead of having humans debate this issue, he has robots and androids debate it 10,000 years in the future. The year is 11,945 AD. The remnants of humanity have been living on the moon for the past 5,000 years. Their current circumstances were spurred by the arrival of an alien race that attempted to wipe out the human species, which they did via the creation of antagonistic machine life forms. Roughly 200 years after this escape to the moon, the humans launched their counteroffensive. They created an elite military force of advanced androids to fight on their behalf. However, since their initial pushback in 5204 AD, they have yet to break the stalemate between the alien-created machines and the androids fighting on humanity's behalf. For the first half of the game, we play as 2 androids, one named 2B and another named 9S. In their journey to destroy the machines and save humanity, they will interact with various allies and enemies, most of whom are dealing with their own existential woes and trying to solve them in their own way, usually by echoing the philosophy of an existentialist or a prominent figure from the Enlightenment era. Before I analyze those characters and the ways their philosophies are showcased, I do want to add a couple of extra thoughts on the game's presentation and setting. It is very typical of Yoko Taro to use opposing elements in a game in order to provoke the gamer to think. In his first directorial effort, Drakengard, he would take common action game tropes and flip them, like make our supposed heroes villains, or have the characters constantly chastise us for killing our enemies. In the first Nier game, the story would frame certain events in order to make us perceive them one way, and then introduce information later that betrayed that original perception. This trend continues in Nier Automata by telling
I really liked the way that Nier Replicant was in the original version. I really wonder if in the version that became Near Replicant, if there was any consideration given to maybe having the protagonist be maybe either or the older, uglier version he could be, or being like the anime pretty boy. Because I remember the version of it I have for Xbox, you play as this older, man. He's got like bald spots all over him. He has like a messed up eye, just stuff like that. And then in the PlayStation version, I believe you would play as, the more stereotypical anime boy, young man in anime. Very slender, very handsome features, nothing off-putting about him. Whereas the version I remembered trying to play, but I never finished, he was very off-putting in his appearance. Intentionally so, I might add. Excuse me.
Telling a story about androids and robots as a way to comment on humans and their nature. Their attempts to emulate or interpret human thoughts and behavior are done clumsily, often to humorous effects. This immediately puts the gamer in a philosophical mindset, making them wish they could interject and either suggest the correct way to behave or at least an alternative. However, there will be times where the game challenges this desire to interject by introducing a philosophical conundrum that has no clear answer. Then, in our attempts to provide an answer, we end up struggling in a way that is equally as clumsy, which in turn breaks down the divide between man and machine. Ultimately, a game about mechanical life forms becomes ironically one of the most human games ever made. Finally, I just want to comment on the way the game's world fosters that aforementioned philosophical mindset. Taking a page from games like Journey, Dark Souls, and Shadow of the Colossus, there are many times where the game will provoke feelings of depressive isolation as you run around its desolate, dilapidated world. As the soft, ambient music plays, you cannot help but reflect on why the world around you ended up the way it is now, what philosophies led to its destruction, and what part your beliefs might play in its future. Though your journey through the barren landscape might not invoke the peak emotional highs from those aforementioned games, it does foster some of the best transcendental meditation that you can receive, be it from a game or any medium. At this point, I would like to detail the ways in which the game's various characters address the game's underlying philosophical question. But before I do, I will issue that promised spoiler warning. If you have not played Nier Automata, please do not spoil for yourself this unique, masterful work of art. Please pause this video and go play it as soon as you can.
I give you that same recommendation, honestly. No guides for anything, but I don't know. No guides for the main endings, but if you get most of the endings, no shame in looking up the other joke ones. That's my recommendation. If you just want to make sure you get everything, feel free to use a guide. I'm not big on whether or not you use a guide. You might need one for some games, I know I've needed them for the Nancy Drew games that I've played so far.
Taking a cue from a deeply profound game like Xenogears, most of the character names in Nier Automata are references to real-life philosophers and other intellectuals. And just like Xenogears, sometimes those references can mean absolutely nothing or absolutely everything. In the case of machines like Hegel or Marx, their names reference the German philosophers George Wilhelm Hegel and Karl Marx, but their respective idealist and socialist philosophies bear very little, if any, impact on the game's overall story. However, machines like Simone, Kierkegaard, and Emmanuel are very relevant to the game's main theme. Now very quickly, before I explain why they are relevant, I do want to make one last comparison to Xenogears. Though that game is an undeniable masterpiece, its attempts to reference various complex ideas from various subjects did make it too ambitious for its own good. Though it fulfilled most of its ambition, I do think its true depth is probably lost on people who do not have a basic grasp on psychoanalysis or esoteric religious traditions like Gnosticism and Kabbalah. In contrast, Nier Automata focuses mostly in on just philosophy, and distills a variety of complex ideas into a mostly accessible form, all while not compromising any of their majesty. The best way to set things up is with the story of Emmanuel. One day, 2B and 9S encounter a kingdom of machines in the forest. This kingdom broke off from those warring against humanity and the androids, wishing to pursue their own destiny. Initially, this kingdom was established by a robot named Ernst, who ruled as king for 128 years. One day, Ernst dies, and supposedly has his consciousness transferred into a baby robot model. The robots of the Forest Kingdom expect this baby to grow just like a human does, but after another 128 years pass, they finally realize that the baby is not growing. Huh, really? Took you a century to notice that? The name Emmanuel is a reference to the aforementioned Immanuel Kant, and in this case, his philosophy of the thing in itself is being invoked. To Kant, he believed that human beings were unable to perceive the world around them as it actually is, due to their inherent imperfection. In effect, they could only create semi-corrupted representations for themselves, but never truly perceive the thing in itself. Like I mentioned before, this is one of many examples of the machines trying to understand and emulate human behavior, but clumsily doing so. They are unable to perceive the robot baby as it truly is, thinking it is just like a human baby that will grow. Though we see the error in their thinking, we are not so different from them, in that our understanding is also limited by our imperfect bodies and minds. Now, if perception is limited, one can logically infer, as Kant did, that this applies to human reason and the ability to create one's own values. This view is justified via many characters in the game. In the case of the character of Simone, she tries to give her life meaning by beautifying herself in order to garner the love of a robot named Jean-Paul, a striving that was antithetical to the feminist beliefs of the philosopher she was based on, Simone de Beauvoir. In the case of the character of Kierkegaard, he promises his overzealous religious followers that they will become like gods through rituals. This was the exact opposite of the real Kierkegaard, who, though an ardent Christian, was against collectivist Christianity and dogmatic rituals. On and on, every character fails to create their own values through reason, as Nietzsche believed we needed to do. Ironically, one might reason from this, as Kant, Locke, and Burke did, that reason without God to guide us is insufficient. Though
That's really interesting. I didn't notice those ideas. You know, it's really fascinating because I would not have thought of who the characters represented without this, probably, because I had no clue. Because I had no clue who Simone was.
Beauvoir. In the case of the character of Kierkegaard, he promises his overzealous religious followers that they will become like gods through rituals. This was the exact opposite of the real.
Maybe there's something hidden within this, like the theme of machine and man being opposites as well. That's another thing I'll have to think about.
Kierkegaard, who, though an ardent Christian, was against collectivist Christianity and dogmatic rituals. On and on, every character fails to create their own values through reason, as Nietzsche believed we needed to do. Ironically, one might reason from this, as Kant, Locke, and Burke did, that reason without God to guide us is insufficient. Though Nier Automata makes a strong case for that, it makes an equally strong case for the opposing argument, and the primary exhibit is the character Pascal. He is named after the French proto-existentialist Blaise Pascal, who is most famous for his philosophical argument known as the wager. Pascal likens belief in God to a sort of coin toss. Either God exists or does not exist. He believed that it was better to believe God exists and act as if God will judge you for your morality upon death. That way, when you die, you will go to heaven if he does exist. If he doesn't exist, then you will lose nothing upon death. To believe he doesn't exist when he does would, theoretically, equate to an eternity in hell. Though this seems like a reasonable argument at first, Yoko Taro quickly eviscerates it when applying its logic to an artificial consciousness. Unlike with humans, a machine's consciousness would not go to heaven upon death, because their mind does not share a theoretically divine link to the natural world.
This is actually something I'm thinking about for some writing I'm doing. If something is created artificially, does it have a divine soul? That's another one I have to put down on my list of things to research.
So dark, so cold.
The inference from this is that there is no transcendent reward to acting morally in this life for a machine. So, what is to stop them from giving into feelings of resentment and murderous hatred when life gets too painful? This question is explored with the robot Pascal. He was a pacifist machine who, like the members of the Forest Kingdom, split off from the warring machines in order to pursue peaceful coexistence with the androids. Though this peace is maintained for the majority of the game, it is upset when the leaders of the androids infect their troops with a logic virus, causing them to become mindless yet more effective berserkers when making a final push on the machines at the end of the game. This logic virus spreads to the machines and causes them to attack one another. Thankfully, Pascal manages to save a selection of child machines from the virus and others infected by it. But when Pascal returns to the child machines, after successfully fighting back the infected, he discovers the most horrifying thing imaginable. All the children ran themselves through, out of fear of what might happen if the infected machines found them. But the horror of the situation and the despair it brings Pascal are not the worst parts. Rather, it is the guilt Pascal feels for teaching the machine children the concept of fear. Their fear brought them to despair, and that despair made them end their lives. With this unimaginable pain, Pascal decides he cannot go on living. So, he asks the player to either kill him or wipe his memory, which you can either refuse or accept. Now, it's easy to say if you're religious that self-termination out of despair is a sin. Even if you aren't religious, it's easy to say that the moral choice is to find a new meaning to strive for. But in that moment, when the ones you love lie dead before you, and you feel overwhelming guilt for this occurrence, those principles easily become negated, especially when you're a machine whose actions theoretically have no religious consequence. In times like these, one can see the utility that a belief in God could have to keep somebody from giving into despair. But when that God is silent, when that God does not show you a way to deal with that unbearable emotional burden, then the temptation to curse God and his creation becomes too great. In the worst cases, that resentment takes the form of revenge against God. For Pascal, that revenge was self-termination, but for others, it can be mass slaughter. In the case of the character 9S, he suffers 2 existential blows that put him on a murderous crusade. Later on in the game, he uncovers unsettling information, which suggests that the Council of Humanity on the Moon was established by the android military, when it should be the other way around. When he confronts his commander about this, she casually and quickly confirms the information's validity, leaving no time for 9S to make the logical deduction that humanity has been extinct for thousands of years. But why the lie? Well, if you don't have something to fight for, to strive for, then what's the point of going on living in this war-torn, miserable world? And now 9S, somebody who has fought his entire life for humanity, finds out that all his efforts were for naught. Worse yet, when he goes to tell 2B, the android that he not so subtly had strong feelings for the entire game, she is mercifully killed by the android A2 after she was infected with the logic virus. Naturally, having his 2 sole reasons for living eliminated in the same day was too much for 9S to handle, and he figures the only way he can justify his continued existence is killing as many machines as he can, as a symbolic form of cosmic revenge. With these various characters, Nier Automata illustrates the impossibility of this philosophical conundrum. One can try to create one's own values without God, but the game shows multiple incidences where this goes wrong on account of human, or in this case, mechanical imperfection. But embracing God's existence has its own problems as well, and can lead to things like zealotry or a misinterpretation of gospel, or resentment at God when the pain of life becomes too much to bear. Ultimately, the right choice forever eludes us, and if there is a God who cursed us with this cryptic puzzle, the confusion and pain that arises from seeking an answer in vain would be enough to make somebody want to kill him. Though there are other games that tackle this type of existentialism in very powerful ways, games like Soma, Pathologic 2, none of them manage to cover as much ground as Nier Automata does, while also making the ideas accessible to a variety of audiences and preserving their intense emotional difficulty.
That is true, I think, because I can think of a lot of games, a lot of movies that try to tackle these things. And usually what always happens is they cut it down. They make it too simple. They make it way less, or they package it in a way where an average person that does not fit the target audience perhaps would never understand it. But with Nier, I feel like even if you got someone who all they do is they play Call of Duty, if you got someone like them to play it, I think they'd get it. If they enjoyed that kind of gameplay. You know? That's what I'm thinking.
It is a comprehensive yet paradoxically simple summation of centuries of philosophy, all within a parable about machines. But I think the best thing of all is that the game was bold enough to be honest about the problem, to acknowledge that neither side of the debate has an all-encompassing answer, and furthermore, it trusted that the gamer would know how to respond when all the information was given to them. At the end of the game, when the androids and machines are all dead, the credits will begin to roll. At this point, you can engage in a mini-game where you can try to shoot all the names in the credits while dodging incoming attacks. Quickly, the gamer will realize the literal impossibility of shooting all the names without dying. When you do die, messages will pop up on screen. At first, these messages will taunt you, asking you to accept defeat or admit that your actions are meaningless. But after a few attempts, you will begin to receive messages from real people, real gamers from all over the world, encouraging you to keep going. If you choose to continue, the gamers who came before you will lend their data in the form of extra power, enabling you to defeat all the names in the credits. Before the game ends, you are offered the chance to help somebody else in the way that those other players helped you. But in order to do so, you have to sacrifice your save data. If you're inclined to do this, the game will remind you that this will be a thankless act. The person you are helping might be somebody that you would intensely dislike if you met them. Still, you are invited to make a loving, compassionate sacrifice for a complete stranger. After playing a game that made you stew for so long in the misery of existence, in the possibility that life truly is meaningless, maybe life is nothing but pain.
I remember, I think I had between 30 and 40 hours on my save file. I had not gotten all the endings yet, and that was a really hard choice to make. But I just stared at it and I couldn't say no. I don't know why. That was a hard choice, but it's like I really felt like I couldn't say no in that moment. I felt like saying no was wrong in some way, and that fascinates me still. Also, that end credit scene is just wonderfully done. They did a really good job because I mean, just thinking about it, you have just all of the elements coming together. You have the music, you have the fact that you've done this, you've gone through the credits so many times before. Everything is combining into one thing, and you know, I just remember deleting my save file and watching every bit of it get erased and thinking, maybe someday I'll have to come back to this. And maybe someday I will.
With no transcendent purpose. But in this moment, you can choose the one thing that might have the power to transcend even that potential reality. And as simple as it might seem, that thing is love. No other game has made me feel as much despair or as much hope as Nier Automata did. For that alone, I would consider it the most profound game of all time. But there are all the other aforementioned layers, amongst others that I wasn't able to fit into the flow of this video. But at the end of the day, this is just my opinion. I invite all of you to continue to argue for alternative games in the comments section below. But please, we're all video game fans here. Please be civil and constructive with your comments. Please give this video a like if you liked it, that helps me out a lot, and make sure to check out either of the videos you see on screen now for more Nier-related content. Until next time, remember to stay safe and stay yellow.
Alright, well now, we've got to find the... Gotta find the... We gotta find the one I was looking for. The one I mentioned earlier.
Let's
All right, I'm back. I'm gonna remember that 5 gives me a permanent smile.
Let's skip the long, drawn-out intro. I'm going to explain to you why we need more video game remakes and remasters, and to do that, I'm going to reference something that recently happened to me. Something that caused me a great deal of personal stress. A few days ago, I finished going through all of the Legacy of Kain games for the very first time. Absolutely awesome series. You guys have
I want to play Soul Reaver 2 so bad. I really want to play Soul Reaver. I want to play all of these, honestly. But I can't even get... I don't even know if I can find any of the Legacy of Kain games anymore. Maybe on GOG. I'd have to look at GOG real quick, but... Soul Reaver and Soul Reaver 2, unavailable on Steam now.
Have been begging me to do videos on those games for a while now, and I'm happy to say that you won't have to wait much longer. I will say though that trying to play them was an exercise in cruel and unusual punishment. Not because the games were difficult, but because I couldn't find a copy of these games that worked. I wanted to play Soul Reaver first, right? Because I played a little bit of it as a kid, but I never finished it. However, my old PC copy was scratched up, so I had to buy it again on Steam. That was a big mistake, because apparently the game has an aneurysm if you dare to play it on Windows 10. I couldn't get a refund because I decided to play the game 2 weeks after I bought it, when the warranty expired. So I had to download a fan-created fix, which thankfully made the game run. But the problems didn't stop there.
This is reminding me of the time I tried to play Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Just immediately off the bat. I tried to play that game, and it was like, hey, guess what? You can't play the game. You gotta download this patch. You gotta download this fix. Well, you downloaded it. Well, guess what? It still doesn't work real. It still doesn't work right. Yep. Yep. You want to have the controls work? No. Nope. You want to fix the controls in the options menu? Nah, you gotta install this other patch and this other patch. Oh, and you gotta go to these weird websites to get the patches for them. No, thank you. I will just hold on to it, I guess.
When I played it, there were audio glitches like every 10 minutes, none of the aspect ratios looked good, and the camera system was so annoying. You could tell that this was a game developed with the PlayStation 1 purely in mind, back before they had controllers with analog sticks. Thank God the story is awesome, because otherwise, I wouldn't have bothered. Now, Soul Reaver 2 would have to be better optimized than the first No? That's okay though, I didn't waste my money on an unfinished product this time. I decided to go the emulator route. I literally downloaded PCSX2 for the first time just so I could play this game. The problem is that the first time you try to switch between the material world and the spectral realm while using the emulator, the game crashes. And there doesn't seem to be any fix to it. So I was forced to watch somebody else play through it. Now, I can bear the process of trying to get old games to work. I'm used to it by now because I cover a lot of old games on my channel. But unfortunately, patience isn't a universal virtue, especially amongst gamers. Plus,
You know, the only thing harder than trying to get an old game to work on your PC is trying to get them to run on Mac. I remember when I played Remember 11. Arsim went out of his way, maybe some other people too, but I remember Arsim went out of his way to help me because he had to remove all of the cutscene files from the game to get it to work. That was funny.
many new gamers would probably ask why they should bother going to all this trouble to get these games to work, when there are newer games with better graphics, better gameplay, and in some cases, arguably better stories than Legacy of Kain. In response to that question, I would say that while there may be better stories, the essence of Legacy of Kain, the factors that made that game great, will never be replicated. It would be like trying to do a Metal Gear Solid game without Hideo Kojima's involvement. It would be like trying to remake Pulp Fiction without Quentin Tarantino. Sure, you might be able to make a good game or movie, but it won't be great in the same way that the original was great. It is for this sole reason that I recommend people try to experience the Legacy of Kain series in any way they can. Unfortunately, one's ability to do that has become seriously compromised, thanks to something that Sony chose to do back on March 22nd of this year. On July 2nd, the online stores for the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Portable will be closed down. If you're a console gamer and my praising of the Legacy of Kain games is making you want to play the first two games, you have less than 3 months to buy them. If you don't buy them, you'll have to resort to finding a physical copy on eBay, where you'll have to pay $40 for Blood Omen 1 and only slightly less for Soul Reaver. Moreover, the prices on these things will likely go up once their availability on the digital stores is removed. If that sounds annoying now, wait until your old systems break down and finding somebody to repair them becomes borderline impossible. And even if you find somebody, you know you'll be paying quite a bit of dough. After enough time,
My PlayStation 2s, I have two PS2 Slims. Their displays no longer work. I need to replace them with HDMI probably. I just don't have any knowledge of how I would go about that process. I'm thinking the next best bet would be figuring out a way to make it to where my computer reads the PS2 disc with the PS2 reader and just runs a PS2 within the PC. But at that point, it would just be way easier to do the emulation thing.
Time has passed, the only option that will be available is emulation, but that's exclusively for PC players. In respect to the Legacy of Kain games, the most popular one is, obviously, Soul Reaver, with only 1.5 million people having downloaded the game since the release of the PS1 and Dreamcast emulators. Many of the people who downloaded this game are likely people who are pre-existing fans of the franchise, meaning less than 1 million PC gamers have tried to get into Legacy of Kain since it was available for emulation. To be frank, the legacy of Legacy of Kain is close to being forgotten, close to being lost in time like tears in rain. Millions of gamers the world over will never experience some of the greatest writing in the history of the medium, due to outdated graphics, archaic mechanics, lack of availability, and a solitary focus on what is new by both gamers and developers. Does this mean that Legacy of Kain and other games like it are doomed? Not necessarily. This is where the necessity of remakes and remasters come in. The Legacy of Kain games would benefit immensely from a remake. Unlike audiences back in the day who didn't support the series, audiences today are much more sophisticated when it comes to the types of stories they consume. If people can follow Game of Thrones and all its story threads over multiple seasons, they can follow the multiple timelines and Shakespearean dialogue of Legacy of Kain. It is also for that reason that I think these games will be more appreciated today than they were 20 years ago. The games have unique art direction which would look awesomely creepy with updated textures. Add in a better camera and, I don't know, maybe a Souls-like combat system, and you got yourself something that has Game of the Year potential. It would be
Videos from 3 years ago. 2021. All right. Imagine Legacy of Kain, Unreal Engine 5. That's all I gotta say. Have you seen that game that they're making that's like, it's supposed to be like found footage and none of it's real? Legacy of Kain, but that graphically capable. It would be intense. I'm just trying to think. That game is just trying to create real textures and real looking people, and it looks stunning. Just think about, like, if you have an art team and people making assets for you and all the other things in Unreal Engine 5. Imagine how crisp that would all look. Like the System Shock remake, even better than that. It would be so cool. It would be so cool looking.
a useful investment for Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics, and it would be less of a financial risk than putting forward a new IP. They would just need to follow the blueprint of the original series. Contrary to the beliefs of certain game developers like Electronic Arts or Activision, the desire for single-player games has continued to be expressed by gamers the world over, what with the success of games like Jedi Fallen Order and Cyberpunk 2077. Plus, the name Legacy of Kain is still recognizable. It's one of those series that most gamers have likely heard of, even if most haven't played it. If a remake was released to good reviews, I'm sure millions would buy the game. Beyond...
Well, not only that, but it was a PlayStation exclusive at the time. So you had a limit to like what the maximum people that would buy it was. Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver was on the PS2. The PS2 has a lot of interesting elements to it, and so does the PS3. So the PlayStation 2, it was originally like, hey, I have this need for a DVD player because I like DVDs. But also, I have these doggone kids that want to play them video games. What if I got something that does both? Because if you are a parent and you watch your movies like Fight Club and you watch your R-rated movies when the kids are put to bed and it's 10 o'clock at night, well, guess what? The kids can have the PlayStation, they can have the TV, they can do whatever they want after school and on the weekend. They can just hang out until it's movie time. They can just do that, and then you have both. Ta-da! You've solved the problem. They get Crash Bandicoot and whatever other games you want to give them, and you get your DVDs. Same thing with the PlayStation 3. You're a video file. You like HD video. You have a high quality television. Perhaps you even have like a computer monitor that's extra large as your television. And instead of getting a Blu-ray player, you get a PlayStation 3 because it's a Blu-ray player that goes up to 1080p and it plays video games. And it's cheaper than a Blu-ray player is right now because a Blu-ray player costs $1,000. The PlayStation 3 costs $600, maybe $700. And so you get that instead. So, both of those consoles, they ended up with different audiences. The Blu-ray thing was actually really good for Sony, I think, because I remember LA Noire is a good example. LA Noire for the Xbox 360 came on 3 separate discs. It was 1 disc for PlayStation 3. Yep. And that's just insane to me. Especially considering the size of LA Noire. If I look at it right now. I'd have to press a button for that, though. Well, we'll look at it later. Oh, wait, never mind. I see where it is. We're doing display capture, so I don't want to accidentally display things I don't want people to see. L.A. Noire. LA Noire is 14 gigabytes total. And that was too much for like an Xbox at the time. I think you might have seen my display, which is fine. Trying to get my chats back up. There we go. Yeah, it's just really interesting how that all combines together at the end of the day.
The Legacy of Kain, there are numerous games that would benefit from either a remake or remaster. Obviously, whether to simply remaster or go full remake would depend on each individual game and how outdated the graphics and mechanics are. A game like Final Fantasy X can simply be remastered and millions will buy it because the core gameplay still works to most people's liking. In contrast, a game like the upcoming Nier Replicant benefits from the remake treatment because the combat in the original game wasn't well received, even by people who, overall, like the original game. In either case, the game would be available to a new generation of gamers. Now, in order to strengthen my argument, I read every objection or worry that my viewers had about remasters and remakes. I think I got everyone, but if I missed any, please make sure to leave them in the comment section below. The primary objection seems to be evident if we look at the poll I posted. Though 85% of people voted in favor of remakes and remasters, half of the people who voted said we should still prioritize new IPs. I understand this sentiment. In fact, I agree. If the market for remakes and remasters becomes oversaturated, there'd be no room for innovation. The games industry would somewhat parallel the current state of the movie industry, where all the successful movies are part of a pre-existing franchise, and new, original film only makes money if it wins awards. This is a very good criticism, and it is something we as gamers should keep in mind when we make our purchases. Even if a remake is good, like Demon's Souls or Resident Evil 2, it is still incumbent on us as consumers to support new original titles. If we do this, I believe it is entirely possible to have a healthy market for both new IPs and updated games. Also, there is an inadvertent benefit to having more remakes and making them monetarily successful. It would be another way to demonstrate to the studios the necessity of producing single-player games. Unlike many games nowadays,
Man, this video came out before Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 is really big because it just shows like, hey, you want to charge, you know, this much money for a game, you know, include those bonuses, one, because it was like, I want to say it was $80 and you got the art book and you got the soundtrack. And that was $80 in addition to the original $60 you would pay for the game itself. And so there's like a extra credits video that came out recently that was like, no guys, games are cheaper than they've ever been. And it was argued the way you'd expect, like you know, the way you'd expect someone like that to argue it, where they don't really know what they're saying, you know. But yeah, it's a lot of fun thinking about these things.
That are filled to the brim with microtransactions and toxic communities, games from the past primarily centered around the single-player campaign. If the remakes and remasters for those games are successful, that would not only direct more money to single-player games, remake or not, but it would take away money from games with predatory mechanisms like loot boxes. The next criticism is a fair one, but it is one that I don't think entirely negates the necessity.
I think the loot box thing has gotten out of hand too. Overwatch is a really good example of that. Overwatch 1 had a really good system for monetizing all of that. And then Overwatch 2 came in, got rid of everything that was good about Overwatch 1, and it's just not the same game anymore. And it's like, if you like Overwatch 2, I don't know that you were there for Overwatch 1. I miss Overwatch 1 so much, honestly. The other thing I'm frustrated about with modern gaming is this kernel level anti-cheat. Helldivers has awful kernel level anti-cheat. They're trying to like inject DLL files into your fan drivers and all this other stuff. Nothing that's like right now, nothing that'll cause a virus or anything, but stuff that'll really fuck up your computer. And it's like, why do we need kernel level anti-cheat? Why does my anti-cheat have to go all the way to the kernel level? It's not going to solve anything, you know, especially like if someone really wants to cheat, they just do a 2-computer setup. Cheats on one computer, you know, kernel level anti-cheat on the other. And it's so frustrating that people don't get this. Just very frustrating. Because let's say something goes wrong. Let's say the servers or the service that's got kernel level access to your computer gets infected with something, gets attacked by someone, and now there's like hundreds, thousands of machines that are just a mess because of kernel level anti-cheat being installed. That's the future I see. Not a fun one.
For remakes and remasters. Sometimes the remake or remaster just isn't very good. For every Halo remaster, there is a GoldenEye remaster. For every Black Mesa, there is a Warcraft 3 Reforged. It is very clear that in a lot of cases, there is barely any effort made on behalf of the developers. A lot of them are betting that they will make money no matter how much effort they put into the updated version, so they just don't bother. This is true, but it doesn't have to continue to be true. Gamers are much more sophisticated when it comes to what they purchase compared to the average moviegoer, for example. The prime example of this was the recent release of the Avengers game. The Avengers is one of the hottest franchises in the world. If Square Enix made a good Avengers game, they would have made more money than Jesus, Allah, and the Queen combined. However, gamers got wind of how bad the game was early on and didn't support it, causing Square Enix to lose tens of millions of dollars on the project.
Now we actually have even more to talk about. Wait a second. Now we also have the Suicide Squad. That's the Rocksteady comic book game. We have the Suicide Squad. It was going to be a live service seasonal game from Rocksteady set in the Batman Arkham universe. And where's that? It's unsuccessful. Unsustainable, because people looked at it, they're like, that's not Batman. That's not like the Batman gameplay I know from the Arkham series. They didn't want it. They still don't want it. So, sold poorly, and I don't know that anyone is going to come back for that kind of game week after week, all the time, enjoy the live service aspect of it. I just don't see it happening. It just doesn't feel feasible to me. And that's just another thing people are upset with, is this whole live service thing. You saw it with Assassin's Creed. The new Assassin's Creed game, the bestest version of it, it's like, hey, pay Ubisoft $20 a month. Round it up, of course, but pay Ubisoft $20 a month to play the bestest version of Assassin's Creed and all the other Ubisoft games. It's like, well, no. Now, it's a completely different thing. When Microsoft says pay us $15 a month to play all these games on Xbox, they can get away with it because they're giving you a lot of games. Ubisoft can't get away with it because they're just selling you Ubisoft games. Yeah, they have some good gems in there, but it's not a lot of value for your money month after month after month. No, that's not worth it. And then if Steam were to come out with a service and they were to say, hey, every game on Steam forever is free for you, plus DLC, if you pay us this amount. Oh my gosh, you know how many people would jump on that immediately? $20 a month for every game on Steam to be free for life? It would be a no-brainer. But it's Ubisoft trying to say, oh, all of our games are going to be $20 a month for forever, I guess. They don't have as much to offer as the Xbox store or the Steam store. If those services were to offer something like that, like Xbox does with, Game Pass, you at least have a variety to choose from. You at least have a lot of games that you might be interested that you can look at. But really, it's just not there. It's not there right now. The fact that they want $130 for a game or a subscription to their live service is absolutely absurd. And this video was made before that was really a consideration, I know. But it's just fascinating to see how much has changed recently,
If we collectively continue to put pressure on game studios to do right by us, which continues to be easier and easier with the availability of the internet, then mistakes like what happened with the Avengers will minimize. This pressure would also help to ensure that when a game is remade, that it remains faithful to the original material. That way, the essence of what made the original game so great isn't lost. Now onto some of the more minor criticisms.
I don't want the angry face on. Hang on. What did I say about The Last of Us? like they remade it and they took away its essence. They took away a lot of the underlying elements of the theme. With The Last of Us, you know, the original game and the original PlayStation 4 remaster, you have this whole view at the very end where it's unsanitary conditions. There's a lot going on emotionally with the character, and all these things combining together. In The Last of Us Part 1 remaster for the PlayStation 5 and PC, everything's sanitary, everything's clean, everything looks nice. Nothing like it used to. They've erased the history, and that ruins the theme.
Criticisms. Some said that nothing will ever compare to the original experience. Let's say, for example, that the rumors about Bluepoint remaking Metal Gear Solid 1 are true. As awesome as Bluepoint are, there's just something about the magic of the original PS1 title, with the PS1 graphics and PS1 controls that will never be replicated.
I have a 20-hour stream of Metal Gear Solid 1 on my YouTube channel.
Understand that, but that is an argument exclusive to those who played the original MGS. Just because
it got a freaking copyright claim. It got a copyright claim from some guy who included a sample of the end credit song in his rap song. Yeah, I own the composition, bro. No, you don't. Go away. Go rot. You don't own the copyright to the end theme of Metal Gear Solid. Who do you think you are? So annoying. And that's not even the first time I've gotten one of those.
Because it won't ever be the same for MGS veterans, does that mean we should forbid future generations from experiencing something like MGS? There is a way to maintain the essence of MGS with new graphics and gameplay, even if it doesn't satisfy our nostalgia. And to put the lock on this argument once and for all, why don't we just advocate for remakes and remasters to include the original versions as a part of the package? That way, the game is still preserved in some fashion. You got a whole new way to experience the same game, and you can still play the original on the next generation of console. I figured that this would be the only way that a developer would re-release the old game, because otherwise, there wouldn't be much financial incentive to do it. Finally, I want to address this notion that some games are just so perfect as they are that they should be left untouched. To quote one commenter, "We don't repaint the Mona Lisa." I can understand why somebody would make this argument. To a lot of people, there are certain properties that are so sacred, so archetypal in their quality, that remaking them would be sacrilegious. This is why nobody wants a remake of Back to the Future, for example. Nonetheless, the Mona Lisa argument fails because of a false equivalency between how one experiences visual art and how one experiences a game. All one has to do to appreciate the Mona Lisa's beauty is to look at it. You can search a picture of the Mona Lisa online no problem and view it for free. Experiencing the Mona Lisa isn't contingent on whether you are able to pay thousands of dollars to fly to the Louvre in France just to see it. But in the medium of gaming,
There is an argument to be made that maybe seeing it in person gives off a different atmosphere, but it is questionable. Like, hey, is this because I'm with other people that are also here doing the same thing? I think that it depends on the painting, probably. I don't know that that experience would come in with the Mona Lisa, honestly, now that I think about it, because I don't know what kind of paint was used. But I know, like, if you go see a Da Vinci painting, like the Starry Night painting, is that the right one? No, Van Gogh's Starry Night. My mistake. If you go see Van Gogh's Starry Night in person, there's an element to it, of the oil painting and all that stuff, because it is layered so thick, where you are left with like more of an understanding of it because you can see the textures and things. What I'm just saying is like there's a difference though, like, and then also paintings get redone all the time. They get repainted over. The goal is to preserve them as they were, but it's usually like restoration stuff. It's done by experts. They restore the painting as age and time damage it. And there are some very funny images of what happens when someone does the restoration without the expertise.
Certain requirements need to be made in order to experience old games, be it the hardware, the software, or the gamer's ability to adapt to old gaming mechanics. It doesn't take much skill to look at a painting or watch a movie because all you have to do is stare, but experiencing a game requires hand-eye coordination, patience, and, in some cases, a willingness to spend hours trying to get good. One might say that gamers ought to get over the reservations and experience the original game as it is, but unfortunately, there is a difference between what gamers ought to do and what gamers will do. And besides, even if gamers the world over collectively decided to struggle past outdated game design, they would still need the technology to play the game in the first place. And those are all the reasons why I believe there should be more remakes and remasters of old video games. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know so we can keep the conversation going. What games would you like to see a remake or a remaster of? Personally, I would love to see a remake of either Silent Hill 1 or 2 with a better combat system. Yeah, I know what you're all saying, dream on. Please remember to hit that like button if you like this video, that helps me out so much. Until next time, just remember, as always, stay yellow.
I strongly agree. I strongly agree. Let me make sure I link this to the chats. There we go. All right. I think I'm done with React content for now. I'm probably not going to leave the VOD on Twitch, just in case there's like a copyright issue that comes about from what was used in his videos. I don't think there should be, but you never know like what music might get flagged or not. So I'm going to stop this stream. I'm going to pull up Nancy Drew and we're going to switch over to that for about 2 hours. I want to say 2 hours. That'll give me time to get a little bit deeper into that mystery. And then at the end of that, we will see what I decide to do from there. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on this evening, so I'll see.